All right, hi everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday night at Dalton Center. Even though you're not here, we are bringing it to you virtually. We're very excited to have a resident artist providing the creative content for us this evening. I hope you'll join me in welcoming Dr. Carter Rice. Hi, Carter.
Hello, Bob. Thank you for having me. Dr. White, I should say. Sorry. Yes, you were
No,
so
no,
nice to
no.
give me that title, and then look at
We're
me.
on a
Just
first name basis. Cool.
that's true.
Yeah. So, Carter, this is the beginning of your third year here in the School of Music, right?
Um, yeah, kind of fourth because I did a
Okay.
1 year visiting gig,
Oh,
but
right,
yeah,
right. Yeah, you
but
had that
yeah,
first year. Yep.
I know time has flown, but yeah, third year full time with this current sort of teaching job. Yes.
Right, right. And you've been instrumental in helping to streamline and add, content and things to the programs in our Multimedia Arts Technology program. And that sort of forms the basis of some of the creative work you're presenting to us tonight, too. But I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the MAT program. What kind of things are the students involved in it hoping to do in their careers? What kind of things are they getting out of the program? And what sort of things have you been working on specifically to improve the program and make it, fit their needs?
Sure. That's a wonderful question. Yeah, so the MAP program is a really diverse and wonderful group of students. I actually, so all my degrees are in composition, and so I was kind of imagining for many years I'd get a more traditional job of teaching music composition, which of course I applied for and have done to some extent in the past. But when I got this job, I was a little unsure just at first how my skills would fit with the program, because a lot of these students want to be audio engineers and music producers and live sound engineers, and some of them want to be filmmakers and web designers, so it's really diverse. So that was a little intimidating at first, but then after spending a few years with the students, it's been wonderful because they're just such a smart and supportive, wonderful group of students amongst each other, and the relationship I think that we have with them is really great. So that's been really wonderful. I've enjoyed getting to work with these students who are doing such a diverse array of stuff, and I think many of them are achieving their artistic and career goals. It's a relatively new program, as you know. I mean, we're doing the big program review, the whole campus, well, not the whole campus, a lot of the campuses this year, and we're excited because we have like 80 some odd majors, and they're all doing different and cool stuff. And they leave the program, in my opinion, with a really great set of skills that is it's like usable stuff beyond necessarily just doing music, which is kind of cool. So that some of our students are getting jobs at like advertising firms and other places that can use these skills, even if they aren't directly like musical places. So that's been really cool. And as a result, I've been more than happy to adjust what I do creatively, artistically, and technologically to sort of fit with a lot of what they are doing. Because I'm this classically trained composer, and I like writing like for the orchestra and doing some of that stuff that I did for many years in school. But for me, composition, I'm passionate about it, but it was always sort of a vehicle to get me towards teaching at the college level, because that was always what I wanted to do. I really love teaching college students. And so when suddenly the more strictly music composition part was taken away and this multimedia arts tech stuff was added, it was kind of like, oh, cool, let's pivot and try doing some different stuff. And then I get to learn some of the things that my students want to do. I get to learn from them. And it's created, at least for me, a really positive feedback loop. And I'm really excited to kind of continue building my skills on the stuff that they like to do.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. And it's been great to see the kind of things they come up with. I was on Carter's search committee when he was hired here, and I remember one of the things we did for all the candidates was observe them giving guidance to students that were about to graduate from the program. They had their capstone projects, and those ranged from, sort of a electronic dance music production to one person was developing an app, a smartphone app that was basically like a drum machine in the phone. I mean, it's really, really cool. And, lots of really interesting and creative projects. Now, Carter, I know you a little bit, and I know you're from the Dakotas. North Dakota or South Dakota?
I'm from North Dakota.
North Dakota, right. Now, I'm wondering, growing up, well, when you came to us, it was clear that you already had a wide array of skills that, in addition to having the expertise to teach composition and theory and all these kinds of things, as well as technology, you also had a lot of experience in video production and filmmaking and things like this. when you were growing up in North Dakota, did you sort of view this all as, one giant pool of interests that you hoped would result in a career one day, or did you feel like you had to sort of specialize early on? I'm kind of curious what your background was there.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying, like I didn't necessarily want to specialize. I think I didn't realize that like the sort of broad range of skills would be useful until a bit later in life. But I did realize that I think right around the time I started like grad school at Bowling Green, that's when I realized like, okay, yeah, I could be a composer, but there's like 7 composers in the world who make a living off that. So first of all, that was already going to be hard just to straight up be a composer. And then it was like, well, do I want to be like a tenure track professor in composition? And those jobs are so few and far between, right? And so difficult, especially if they involve no technology at all, right? I mean, like even just here at Western, if you think about hires in recent years, a lot of them, if they involve one thing, they want to involve technology. So when I was growing up, that was not necessarily on the forefront of my mind. I mean, I was really fortunate because my dad, hey Dad, if you're watching, Peter Rice, Peter with a D, which was great. We always knew when telemarketers were calling because it was Petter is what they'd say on the phone. But so he owned like a video production cable advertising agency. So I was super fortunate enough to be able to grow up around like cameras and video editing really early on. And he also got me some audio stuff pretty early on too. And this was around the time. So this would be like, growing up in the like mid to late 90s, I was getting this technology, and that's around the time when like audio and video technology really started to become similar. It's different stuff, but the workflow is really similar. So once I switched to sort of pro audio type stuff in school and for work, it just felt really familiar, and it just made sense to kind of do them both side by side. I never viewed them as strictly different pursuits. And even when I was studying music composition, I was still doing videography work on the side and filming weddings and that kind of, to make a few bucks and do promo videos for companies. And it was a great way to just make a little extra money, and then when it came time to interview for this job, it was great. I was like, yeah, here's my highlight reel of promo videos that is somehow handy for this wonderful job that opened up. It was just unreal to see like those sort of skills combined into one position.
Right. And, to put more of a fine point on it, I guess one of the things I'm thinking about, because we confront this a lot in the present day in the School of Music, to think about career opportunities for our students and stuff, when you're sort of consciously trying to give a student a lot of different skills, there's also a challenge there to provide the follow through to make sure that they're actually internalizing these new skills in a way that they can actually use them, right? I mean, it's one thing to learn about, digital audio workstations and how to record something, but if you don't do projects in that space for a period of time, you're not going to actually get any good at it. You know? So like, I'm sort of wondering how. Were you completely self-directed in your development of these skills? Did you just sort of come up with, well, here's something I'd like to do, and then just sort of do the steep learning curve of figuring out how to get it done,
Yeah, for me, and this is something I recommend with my students too, it was very creatively guided. So I would learn the skills necessary to do something when I had a creative project in mind that would use those things. And I've always found that to be one of the best ways to do it, because if you sit down and you're like, I want to learn this software because I think it does cool stuff, and you just kind of start nebulously learning with no like goal. So kind of like you're saying, like we have our students do projects for that same reason. I try to be very project focused in my class. Same with me. If I was going to try to learn how to use like Super Collider, the coding language, to do something, well, I'm going to make a piece out of it, and I like know some parameters of the piece early on, then that helps me like focus. and of course I was fortunate because I did get to take coursework on various of these topics at different places along the way. A lot of self-learning, which is also required of the students in the MAP program. We give them a foundation and we give them a broad array of stuff, and we encourage them to specialize in things that they're very passionate about and spend more time on. And I think I was in a very similar boat along the way.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I'm wondering too about your creative influences as you've developed as a composer. I'm sure there are composers who had a direct influence on you, and I'd be curious to hear about some of those people. But what about people from other fields, other art forms, or other just other creators of stuff that have impacted what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Certainly, I'm sure I couldn't begin to name all of them now, or even the best ones. They'll probably slip my mind. But yeah, certainly a broad array of stuff. I mean, musically these days, I think I've been drawing a lot of inspiration from, so it was kind of funny when I was doing my exams during my doctorate, I had to answer a question that was like, kind of like discuss 5 like isms, of like the 20th and 21st century, like major historical movements that were influential on music and composition, and then like name composers or artists and pieces and ensembles that are connected with those various isms. So I think I remember I talked about like the rise of music technology, because that was a huge one. I talked about minimalism and post-minimalism, because that's certainly been a force to be reckoned with. And I think I talked about modernism, but then I also talked about like the classical crossover sort of genre, right? And some of that stuff can sometimes be kind of cheesy and new agey. It depends on where you focus, right? Because like Yanni kind of fits in there, and I'm not knocking Yanni, just for what it's worth, but it's kind of cheesy music sometimes. But I think other people fit into that realm really well. So like Bjork is an example that I'll mention frequently, of someone who has this just like incredibly intricate and detailed and wonderful music that is still designed to be slightly more accessible to a broad array of audience in terms of like meter and harmony and that kind of stuff. So lately I've been finding influence from a lot of those types of people, like Bjork, or there's a really great electronic music creator from England named Dave Tipper. He just goes by Tipper if you search on Spotify, and it's just like so it's kind of beat and grid based and kind of EDM like, but with just way more intricate like textures and timbres and constantly changing ideas, so that it's incredibly sophisticated if you kind of want to listen to it that way, or it can just kind of be on. And I've been drawing a lot of inspiration from that, and a lot of what you'll hear tonight is of that. Say it's kind of this more like experimental, avant-garde ambient electronica, without necessarily being like academic electroacoustic, which is certainly something I did for many years. So it's kind of been a fun style break in many ways for me personally.
Yeah. Well, that provides us with a very nice segue into talking about the actual work that you're going to be presenting. Yeah. Can you tell us about this program? How did this begin conceptually, and how did it develop?
So I got an email over the summer from Lori Sims, our friend on faculty, because she helps curate, these things. And she had originally kind of had asked if maybe I would write a piece that was inspired by the quarantine that we've all been going through, and then like maybe some of my colleagues would write it and we'd put together for a concert. But of course, we're not doing much in the hall these days, which is why I'm also streaming from my home studio, because it's just easier. Like basically, it was going to be, why take all of this stuff around me and move it to an empty hall versus when it's just right. So
I should point out that you did the whole School of Music a huge service at the beginning of the semester by, sort of single-handedly directing the installation of a bunch of high-end streaming equipment in our recital hall that is allowing our students to present programs in there and have the recital experience they were hoping to have their freshman year, despite, this whole development. So it's helping bring some degree of normalcy to their lives, as well as facilitating the actual dissemination of those efforts to people who want to listen to it. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I was happy to help. And also David Bernard and Kevin Wessel and Kevin West, some other people did wonderful things. So and John Campos and Paul Shadig, lots of people put in great time. I was just so nervous none of it was going to work. I got in charge of putting together this proposal, and I was like, I think we can buy these 18 odd items for a large sum of money. And then I like frantically got it, and while I was plugged in, I was like, oh my God, it works. But anyway, then I was chatting with Lori, and I was like, well, I was thinking of maybe doing a recital. So the plan was going to be that we would still have like people in the concert hall, but no audience. And I had asked some friends and people on faculty and musicians, like, hey, I've got a series of pieces. I thought, let's just put them together. So I started asking people, but then it was going to be difficult to get like the live sound set up. There was going to be no audience. There's restrictions on stage. And with the nature of like the tech and the microphones and the movement of equipment, it sounded like it was just going to be very difficult. So then I thought, well, in addition to what I'm trying to explore technically and artistically these days, like my students are into some of this stuff. So I thought I'd put together sort of just a 30 to 60 minute sort of thing that's just, it has little pauses in the middle, but it's pretty continuous. That's just quasi-improvisational, all sort of electronically generated stuff. I mean, there's like vocal samples and there's synths and there's a wide array of stuff. You can't see everything right now. You'll see it in a little bit once this goes live, but I'm actually surrounded by devices that I'm going to sort of control and manipulate sound with as we go. And I thought that just would be fun. artistically, and I thought it would be a good challenge for myself from like a software standpoint, from a hardware standpoint, to get even more familiar with some of these tools and styles that I've been wanting to work on that I know my students are interested in well. So in many ways, this is an event for the MAT program. Like, I'm hoping everyone will enjoy it, but my primary sort of audience is the students in my program, and I'm thinking that this is very much sort of for them. It's still weird, especially by some of their standards, but I think people are going to be surprised at how, well, I guess it really depends how much you know me. This might seem like the most normal thing I've done in a decade, or it might seem like the weirdest thing you've ever seen. I guess it'll come from, it depends on your perspective.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit more about the piece. Like, are there specific influential threads that you want to pull out or highlight a little bit, or anything at all like that?
Yeah. Because some of it is somewhat improvised, there is a structure. I don't know exactly how it will all work out. There's a fair amount of freedom, both in length of sections. There are sort of 7 main ideas that get explored over the course of it, and each one, as is often the case with my artistic work, is based off a really simple musical parameter, and then I try to kind of expand that for a while. So, for example, one of the sections near the end is really just all about chained suspensions and sort of chaining one suspension over another, just sort of infinitely, because this sort of technology and these grooves and these loops and the way you can manipulate things after you've input them, it lends itself really well. And I think it's fun to take like one little, sometimes dated musical concept. Like, I mean, not that the suspension is dated, but it's old, right? It goes back to Corelli and stuff and before, right? So that's sort of one of the ideas. One of the sections of the other 7, I mean, it's really just about like beats and polyrhythms, and so like creating like beats, but not in the traditional like you're necessarily going to dance to them, where it's like using irregular time signatures like 11/8 and 7/4, and sort of having different drum machines running at different patterns. And yeah, so it basically, each section is one little idea like that, and then spun out and sort of built into something for 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the section.
Yeah. To go back a little bit to what you were talking about before when you were taking your graduate exams and writing about isms, I'm curious to get some thoughts on minimalism and electronic dance music and sort of, I mean, obviously dance music existed before minimalism, really. If you, but
sure.
I'm wondering about that, the notion of, sort of hypnotic repetition of patterns and the way things change over a large space of time, even though the regular pulsation may be much smaller within that. Do those ideas feed into what you're doing in that section of the piece, or in the piece on a more large scale?
Yes, certainly to some extent. I think I'm definitely drawing influence more from like the electronic music genres in general. Let's just say electronic music is a broad encompassing term, right? To fit sort of all subgenres and styles within. Minimalism is something that I've been at odds with stylistically, at least as a composer, where I could never really write music that was sort of groove based and repetitive, and and I don't mean to overly simplify the whole minimalist movement, because it's wonderfully diverse, but a lot of what we think of when we think of minimal music never really quite fit with me. So I think even what you're going to hear with this set, you'll be able to see some influence from some idea of repetition and groove, but it's treated in a pretty different way. And I also really think that I think it was like the late 80s, early 90s, where like electronic music was maybe more like minimalism, and I think these days it's really kind of evolved and become less. I mean, it depends on who you listen to, but like I was mentioning this guy Tipper earlier. Listen to some of his music, and it doesn't feel like an outgrowth of a lot of the same elements of minimalism that some other, like, because like when I think of like techno, like we don't say techno, and no one says, oh, what's your favorite kind of music? Techno. No one said that for 20 years. We say EDM or dubstep or more specific things, and I think these sort of stylistic shades of gray that we've now come up with along the way have much more interesting shapes and contours and registers and gestures, and it's kind of like jazz, right? Like there's some pretty out there jazz stuff, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I think a lot of still mainstream electronic music is kind of pushing in that direction.
Sure. Yeah, big tents in both cases, I think.
Yeah.
Having spent some time living in Detroit, I know that the spirit of techno lives on.
Oh, yes.
Not the label
Yes.
does or not. But, one other thing I wanted to kind of pick up on that you mentioned a minute ago was that you try to set, at least in simple terms, a parameter for yourself, or a set of parameters when you're coming up with a project. And given your interest in film, it made me think of, you've probably seen this film, The Five Obstructions. Lars von Trier and his mentor, Jürgen Leth, he basically gave his mentor like these incredibly exacting instructions for each part of the film. Like no frame could last more than, or like no shot could last more than 7 frames or something like that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's ridiculously fast, cutting speed and stuff.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about, the effect of limitation on creative limitation, and in terms of being able to give focus and direction to what you're trying to do, and like when in a project do you decide like, okay, I set myself up with this parameter, but now I'm going to chuck it and focus on something else.
You're speaking my language creatively there a lot. I'm a huge fan of self-imposed limits when doing creative work, and I encourage that in my students frequently too. Yes, with the caveat of when it's time to break your own rules and systems, do so. As to when exactly that is for them versus me, I don't even know when that is for me. I don't know if I've ever thought about like at what point do I get pushed to saying the system needs to be broken or changed. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I don't want to say that I'm strict in following parameters, but I am very diligent in like setting up structures and parameters in advance. So for example, what you're going to hear tonight, a lot of this is set up like there's technical limitations where I said like I'm going to drive, like there's the sort of musical implications, but then there might be something like these 5 minutes are going to be nothing but this particular soft synth, and only these 2 parameters will I change over 5 minutes. How can I still make that interesting, exciting, and engaging? And I do that with just about every creative thing I do. I have some sort of parameters that are in play, and then I usually give some sort of trajectory to those, so they're kind of intertwining and intersecting at different, which is not dissimilar from like complex narrative, like high fantasy novels, like the Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, like where there's all these things sort of overlapping and everyone's on different trajectories and they sometimes meet up. I treat musical parameters the same way, where it's like I'll have 7 pitches in play for a few minutes, and then once the 8th one comes in, suddenly we have a new subdivision of rhythm as well. And I used to graph this out. I had like a big giant it was like a whiteboard. I made like hundreds of tiles with little magnets on the back with like arrow shapes and numbers, and I'd rearrange them, and I'd be like, the piece is done, and then I just transcribed, and then I would still try to let myself at the end break as needed to enhance moments of drama and excitement. And I've always been a person who likes really like dramatic music and art. Like I like stuff that aims for really high highs and low lows, which is maybe another reason why minimalism hasn't always jived with me, because it's just some of it depends on who.
There's long stretches in there sometimes.
Yes,
That's really interesting, I mean, even, I teach a general ed music appreciation class, and I know every time we get to the modern era, and I talk about Schoenberg and 12-tone music, it sometimes can seem to students like a completely arbitrary exercise. Like, why the heck did he decide to come up with this weird game to compose with? But really, you see composers imposing these systems on themselves throughout, I think, because there's some way of organically developing an idea. Like, how does this idea turn into something else? There's got to be some reasoning behind it, right? Even if the reasoning is to have it be as random, a chance happening. Yeah. So it's really interesting.
Anything that just removes some amount of choice, because it's terrifying, right? It's like, whether I sit in front of a blank piece of staff paper or like an open session in a digital audio workstation, there's nothing there. It's like, I could do everything or nothing, and also it always cracks me up too, because like you'll have people that will, and I'm not like the world's biggest Schoenberg fan. I'll always defend him if people attack him, but I'm not listening a lot, like on my own, although I think the Book of the Hanging Gardens might be like the best piece ever. It's just sublime. Pretty great. But it also cracks me up because like what I'm going to do with this music is still inherited in these cultural systems. So like even if you write really like sort of more traditionally tonal stuff, you're still following a system. It's just the fact that we take it as so like ubiquitous, but like, are you doing 1-4-5-1? You didn't invent that. That took centuries of like practice and style and tradition. And if it had been dodecacophony along the whole way, maybe it would have, I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of tough to tap your toes to, but
I often wish some of those medieval cadences would have stuck around more thoroughly than they did, because they were pretty cool. But well, Carter, this has been really great, really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your presentation. there in your home studio
Yeah. Thank you very
with
much.
all this kit around you. It's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I'll have a couple of angles so we can sort of see what I'm doing here all at once, and I'm also going to share my screen so you can see the software sort of running at the same time. So hopefully it'll be a pretty dynamic and exciting way to see what's happening.
Well, it's exciting to have you in the School of Music and to have a colleague that's working in this way and creating in this way. So I really thank you for joining me today. And thanks to everyone for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the performance coming up soon.
Hey, everyone, one of my cameras didn't turn on. Let's fix that. There we go. Hey, this should be live. I have some lag. I left the chat on, so someone want to just throw in the chat if you can see and hear me? I gotta wait though, because it takes a second. I see it. Hopefully this is working. This is that awkward part, but then it's gonna get underway. and it's all going to be good. Yay! Okay, people can see and hear me. Cool. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to get started real quick after all the awkward long pauses that you're about to experience. So, hey, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you tuning in. We got some people here. And I left the chat live. It's being moderated, so, but please, like, I'm watching it. Chime in. Let me know what you think of what's happening along the way. I just need to say a few things before I get making some tunes. Thanks to Lori Sims for asking me to do this. Thanks to David Bernard and Kevin West for helping to put this together. Thanks to Bob White for the pre-concert talk beforehand. Obviously, this is the Dalton Live, an interactive series, but I am not in Dalton. I am at my home, so it's not Dalton, but the spirit lives on in this place. This is going to last anywhere from like 30 minutes to 60 minutes, somewhere in that range. Kind of depends. I tried it a few times and it just kind of varies. Depending on the feedback I get from you, that could vary. So I'm excited about that. Let's see. I might check the chat along the way, see how things are going. I'd like to dedicate this performance to my hair. Because I don't think it's going to be around by the time of the next one. So I'd like to sort of send it off properly. Unlike our new director, Keith Kothman, who has the hair of Alec Baldwin, I was not blessed with that. And I think that that's what I want to say before I get started. So, you know, chime in. I'm going to start some music here in a second. And if you don't hear a kick drum come in after a second here, let me know, because that's next on the list.
59, 99, 59. Do things you hate sometimes. That's character. Delete every memory from October 19th.
I really need to go like way too many Sweetwater donuts and it's just like I really need. I really. I. I really. I really need to go biking today. I've been eating way too many Sweetwater donuts.
you 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 should you you should you you should you 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 should probably you 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 should probably vote next week.